Hi, welcome to Wednesday. Before I get started on what the topic will be today, just want to remind people there is a Zoom this Friday from 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and there are still 8 or 9 places available. And new moon this Saturday, and it peaks at 5:21 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, which means it has to be written after midnight but before 5:21 a.m. And that is Eastern Standard Time, so you need to adjust that time to your time zone. And for those of you that are local or don't live too far away, I will be at the Goddess Elite this Sunday, the 14th, from 1 to 4 in the afternoon. Bring pictures, bring your questions, bring books. I'll sign them for you. All of my stuff from the store will be there. And so I just really like seeing all you guys. Masks are still required and we'll be social distancing, but it's worked out the last couple of times really, really well. So come on out and see me. For those of you that knew it was my birthday today, thank you so much for all of the happy birthdays, and I really appreciate them. But you must remember that I don't see them. I don't see questions on Facebook or on Twits or whatever that is. And people say they don't know how to get hold of me. Go to my website. The information, where I'm going to be at, what times, all of this is on my website, which is mariannwinkowski.com. Okay, today I'm going to talk about a 6-unit apartment building in New York City. And I did this place maybe 35 years ago. And it was an old building. It was built in the 20s, so gosh, now it's 100 years old, or yeah, at least or close to 100 years old. A businessman, when he was in his 30s, bought this building and he lived in it, but he also rented out the other 5 units. And then he had 5 daughters, no sons, and he had like 5 daughters within an 8-year time period, and no, all single births. So that was one busy lady. And as the girls got older and married or whatever, they each got one of the apartments. So when I got called in, mom and dad had died, and each of the girls still had their totally paid for in a very nice section of New York City. And a couple of the grandchildren of the daughters were actually now living in the grandparents' apartment. So it was definitely a family affair, no doubt about it. The thing that struck me as a little different was that all of his daughters had flower names. It was Iris and Daisy, Rose. I think, oh, I don't remember the other two, but they were definitely all flower names. And apparently the girls would Twitter when I was there because they would say, well, Daddy liked to call us his bunch of flower daughters. He had a bouquet of flower daughters because they all had flower names. And the really strange part was that any girl offspring that were born after that were also named flowers. So they really got into that. So let me go through this. It took me almost 8 hours to do this building, only because of all the 5 girls with their different personalities. And each one of their units had their own individual ghost, which was really strange. And not that the ghosts didn't go into each other's apartments, but they basically stayed in the one that they were attached to. So let me go through. The artist was in one of the buildings, or one of the apartments, and it was strange because she got the one that had apparently the brightest light, but then she had knocked down some wall or something and even put more windows in so she could have more light for her painting. And apparently she was a pretty good artist, but she had a man ghost attached to her. And I didn't even know that artists did this, but apparently it was expensive back then to buy canvas or whatever you painted on. So she would go to thrift stores or used stores or whatever you did, and she would buy oil paintings or watercolors that were on some kind of canvas. And I don't know how you do that, but she either took the paintings off that were on or covered them over and put her work over the top of them. Well, the one picture she bought belonged to this artist, and he was so angry that the family did not keep his artwork when he died, and that it ended up in a secondhand store, a used store, and this gal bought it. And he came home with it because he finally thought somebody was going to appreciate what he had done. And here she covered it up. Oh my gosh, was he angry. And after that picture was in the house, she never really painted as much as she used to. She was tired all the time. She didn't feel good. She was not married. She had boyfriends over the years, but she was an artist, and that was her life. So that was the ghost that was in her unit. Another lady was a theater actress. And from what she was never in, I'm going to guess she probably wasn't that good at her craft. However, she did have a boyfriend that was fairly well known as an actor, a theater actor. And um, they had gotten married and they had a child, and he ended up dying tragically in the theater. Crazy accident. Something fell off the ceiling on him and killed him. Well, because of the child, who was only about 8 or 9 when he died, he didn't cross over. So he was still with his wife. Now, the daughter was grown and long gone, but he was still with her. She actually talked to him on a really regular basis. I almost, for those of you that remember, there was a show called The Ghost of Mrs. Muir. He was a sailor in I don't know if it was a lighthouse, or I don't remember. It was on a very long time ago. And it sort of reminded me of that. I mean, all of a sudden we were sitting there talking, and she'd say, James, would you come out here? I need to ask you something. And I would see him walk out of a back bedroom, and she could see him too. So it was like, I never knew anybody could do that. She couldn't see anybody else. She could only see him. And her daughter couldn't see her father. And he was tired. He said that, he would stay with her if that's what she wanted. And she sort of gave it up. She said no, he could go. So that was hers. The other one was an accountant. And she had a terrible curse on her from the man that she worked for. he just I mean, back then, none of these women had any kind of, I mean, they all graduated from high school, but none of them ever did any other training after that. I mean, no college, no prep classes, nothing like that. So her accounting was totally learned. I think when her father was alive, she helped do his books with his business. So she had knowledge, and apparently she must have had pretty good knowledge. Otherwise, this boss wouldn't have kept her. But he just was on her constantly. And when he died, he was still on her constantly. He was a piece of work. I'm not kidding you. The next one, she was a hoarder. There was absolutely no place to sit in her apartment at all. And these were not small apartments. These were fairly large apartments. I mean, they were, for sure, they were all at least 2 bedrooms, bath and a half. In New York City, that's pretty high class, especially back in the day. So definitely, uh, she had all kinds of people that came with her. There was definitely a form of mental illness there, and the ghosts that were in her place just made it all the worse. She kept saying, "I'm going to get rid of these. I'm going to change this." And her sisters couldn't talk her out of it. Nobody could talk her out of it, and the place was just a total mess. And the last one was a hypochondriac. She brought more ghosts home with her from doctors' offices, and almost every ghost that died of something, somehow she had a symptom of. It was, talk about feeding each other. So it was so interesting. Each one of these, there was even one in the parents' old apartment where the 2 grandchildren lived. And it was pretty nondescript. I mean, it was just one that came in and out. They were young, and the one that came home from a bar someplace or a dancing place. It was very, very, very unique, and got rid of all the ghosts, protected all of the apartments because they owned the building. I could do the main door coming in, the back door coming in. There was some kind of a weird basement underneath. Did all of that. And at the end of the day, I was done. I was content. I thought everything was really good here. And I went back to the hotel, and I had another house to do in New York the next day in the afternoon. Well, that morning, I got a phone call from one of the daughters at the apartment building. She says, "We still have a problem." I said, "Why? Where?" And she said the 2 sisters that lived on the one side of the apartment, one was on top of the other floor wise. One was on the 3rd floor, the other one was on the 2nd floor. There's something going on in their apartments. I said, "All right." So took a taxi, went back to their apartment. They were waiting. Walked in, went up to the 2nd floor into that apartment. That was the accountant's apartment. And there was another ghost in there. And I said, "Where in the world did you come from?" I said, "I don't understand. How did you, where are you getting in at?" Here it turns out, and here's how I learned things. Every one of these apartments that were on the 2nd and the 3rd floor had fire escapes on the outside of the house or outside of the building. And when they were younger, the father was a little worried about it. And so, because of fire and whatever, he had his fire escapes looked different than everybody else's. At the bottom, you still had to pull them down, but not as far. And they just seemed sturdier than on most other buildings. Well, that's how they were coming in, through the fire escape windows. So put seeds on every one of their windows in every one of the apartments that had access to the fire escape. And since then, any house that I've ever done that has a fire escape, we do put one on that window too, a seed. So that was my New York story. It was very I learned a lot from that, especially with the hypochondriac and the hoarder. Um, Seriously, I think a lot of people that are hypochondriacs or hoarders, they definitely have spirits attached to them. It was maybe 4 or 5 years later, the one sister had died, and I got called for the funeral. And I went back up. I mean, they brought me back up for the sister's funeral, and I was there, and every one of them was so much better in the years that I had been there. The hoarder had actually cleaned out more than 3/4 of her apartment, so she had actually done really well. Um, the hypochondriac, she still had issues, but not as bad as they were. She didn't have, let's put it this way, she didn't have cancer for a week. She didn't have, that's the kind of hype. I just know I had cancer last week. Oh, okay. So, but anyway, it was very interesting. So that was my New York story. Um, Want to remind people that I appreciate again all the happy birthday wishes for today. Still a birthday I'd like to forget, but what am I going to do? I Please remember I don't answer questions on Facebook. I don't see questions on Facebook or any of the other social media. If you need to talk to me, you need to leave a message. That is the only way I am ever going to see your message. And so don't get mad at me when you're angry at me when you write on Facebook and I don't answer. I don't see it. Okay, thank you very much. And we will be doing another case next week, Wednesday. Um, it's St. Patrick's Day next Wednesday. Maybe I'll try to think of a place I've done that fits in with that theme. Have a great week and enjoy finally the decent weather. Thanks, everybody. Bye bye.